This video is about scientific notation. In this video, you're going to learn what scientific notation is, why is it useful, how do you properly write in scientific notation. You're also going to learn how to calculate scientific notation both in your head and in a calculator, and how to do it properly. Let's start with what scientific notation is. Scientific notation is just a special way of making it easier to see and write big or small numbers. Very big, very small. Okay? So for example, 700, 7 times 10 to the 2, those are the same numbers. You may not want to write that in scientific notation. It's not wrong if you do. And sometimes in a multiple choice question, they might throw that at you. But that's not really what scientific notation is for. Scientific notation is for when you have very big or very small numbers. So the second and third number, this is 7 with 13 zeros after it. That's a lot. You don't want to write that. Writing that is easier, and it's also easier to look at it and say, okay, that's a 7 and it has 13 zeros. Bam, you know it. The other one, you have to count the zeros and okay. And for very small numbers, for example, this one, 7 times 10 to the negative 13. This one actually has 12 zeros, and then the 13th decimal place is that one. Okay, so it's a nicer way of seeing big and small numbers. Your calculator, or Excel does it this way too. They do 7E2, or 7E13, 7E negative 13. It's okay for your calculator to do that. It is not okay for you to do that. If you write that as an answer on a test or on a worksheet, that's wrong. You actually have to write out the proper mode. All right, now how to properly write in scientific notation. There's two parts to scientific notation. There's the digit. Okay, you must put the decimal place after the first non-zero digit. Okay, so if I'm looking at this first one down here, put a decimal place after the first non-zero digit. That's right there. Okay, and then the number must have a times 10 to the something. Okay, in order to relocate the digit, or the decimal. It's a positive number if you had to move your decimal to the right. Okay, so when I say positive number to move your decimal place to the right, I mean if you're multiplying it out. Okay, and it's a negative number, and the decimal place would move to the left. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. All right, so down here we have 9.18. We just moved our decimal over right next to the digit. Now, if we're going to compare that, we're going to say, all right, the decimal place was here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The decimal place had been moved over 5 places. So that would be times 10 to the 5th. Positive number means you're making it bigger. Okay. Negative means you're making it smaller. That's a nice way of looking at it. Okay. Now, this next one down here, the decimal place should be here, after the 3, before the 2. So 3.2 is my digit. Times 10 to the 1, 2, 3. Times 10 to the 3. But it's not times 10 to the 3 because first one's a bigger number, second one's a small number. So it's 10 to the negative 3. See how that works? All right, now this whole moves the decimal place to the left and right. Okay, so let's add that in big and small. If it's negative, it's small. If it's positive, it's big. If I have a positive number here, I'm going to move my decimal place 4 numbers to the right. Okay, so I have 4.2, and I'm going to have to move that decimal place 4 spaces to the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Those 2 empty slots get filled with zeros. And 4.21 times 10 to the 4th is 42100, also known as 42,100. All right, if you have a negative, you move your decimal place to the left. So 4.21 decimal place gets moved to the left 4 spaces. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 0, 0. Okay? So that equals 0.000, 3 zeros, 4, 2, 1. Okay? Not too bad. Practice makes perfect with those. All right, how to calculate with scientific notation. Either in your head or by calculator will be the next slide. So, how to do multiplication. Multiplication, you multiply the digits and you add the exponents. Okay, so let's look at this first one here. Multiply the digits. 2 and 3 are my digits. So we're going to multiply them and get 6. Then we add in the times 10 to the, and we add the exponents. 4 plus 7 is 11. 6 times 10 to the 11. Let's do it again. Multiply the digits. 7 and 5. That's 35. Add the exponents. 13 plus negative 25. Okay, that means it's times 10 to the negative 12. Okay? Now, if you're going to divide, you're going to divide the digits and subtract the exponents. So grab our digits. 2 divided by 4, 0.5, times 10 to the 4 minus 7. 4 minus 7 is negative 3. Okay? Now, you might have noticed that both the 35 and the 0.5 are not in proper scientific notation. These are correct as far as the numbers that they represent are true. But oftentimes, if they give you a multiple choice, they're going to put it in proper scientific notation. So you're going to have to be able to get there. So if I have 35 times 10 to the negative 12, I need to move my decimal place from here to here. Okay? So I'm making my number smaller, which means I must make my exponent bigger. So that's 3.5 times 10 to the negative 11, because I made my exponent bigger, more positive. Okay? This 0.5 down here, it becomes 5 times 10 to the, okay, so I made my number bigger, so my exponent must be made smaller, so that's negative 4. All right, and let's do this last one. 9 divided by 4.5. That's 2. And then we have 13 minus negative 25. Minus a negative means plus 38. Which makes complete sense. If you divide by a really small number, you're going to get a really big number. It all works out. Okay? Doing it in your head. Even when you do it in your calculator, especially when you're paying attention to the exponents, you should make sure that your exponents work out. The digits, you know, if they're not pretty and nice like that, they're not the easiest things to multiply or divide. But those exponents, add them, subtract them, make sure your answer comes out reasonable. All right, now in your calculator. In your calculator, you have a button that is usually represented either with a capital double E or sometimes just a single capital E. You don't want to do the one that's a lowercase e. That means something completely different. Don't do that one. Okay? Now the E in your calculator stands for times 10 to the. So, you know how we say 2 times 10 to the 4th? It's the same thing as saying 2e4, okay, when you're in your calculator. So, in your calculator, you would want to type in 2. Now, on this calculator, the E button is your second, okay? Some of them they are, some of them they aren't. It depends on what calculator you have. But usually it's 2, then you have to go up to the top to find the second button, E4. Then you're going to want to hit times 3, second button, E7. And then you hit enter or equals. And you should get 6 times 10 to the 11th. Okay? Next one. You would do 7, second, E, 13, times 5, second, E, negative 25. Okay, I keep track of those negatives and positives. Equals. And you should come out that it is 3.5 times 10 to the negative 11. Okay, so as you saw when you did it in your head, you first got negative 12. This one says negative 11 because it put it in proper scientific notations on its own. Division. You're going to do, I don't want to move that. 2, second, E, 4, times 4, second, E7 equals, and that'll give you 5 times 10 to the negative 4th. Okay? Now, the one thing I'm going to emphasize this right here, and please feel free to give that one a try too. You don't want to use times 10 to the in your calculator. Your calculator has a button for times 10 to the, it's above the log, or you can do times 10 to the caret and use that caret symbol, right? Okay, you use that caret symbol right there. Okay? You don't want to do that. The reason for that, and I do have a reason for it, because I know it might look nice for some of you. You're like, well, it looks how I write it, so I want to type it in that way. It's kind of like, you know, you think in English, so you want to write in English. You don't think in Spanish. You don't want to write in Spanish. Or maybe you do think in Spanish. And then you want to write in Spanish, okay? But you want to write in your native language. This whole E is kind of like, oh, it's a little bit of a different language. You got to get used to it. Here's the reason. If you were to type it into your calculator as 2 times 10 to the 4th divided by 4 times 10 to the 7th. If you were to actually type that into your calculator is very smart, very stupid, and very logical. It's going to go in exact order of operation. It's going to do this one, then this one, then this one. Okay? So it's going to say, all right, 2 times 10 to the 4th, which is perfectly fine. That's what we want. Then it's going to divide by 4. And then it's going to multiply by 10 to the 7th. And that's where the issue comes in. You end up with the proper number, but the wrong exponent, because that's supposed to be down there. So if you have one of the newer calculators that you can actually put a fraction in, fine, whatever, still more typing. Okay? But for most calculators, you really don't want to do that. You can do it if you put parentheses around the base, but once again, it's more trouble than it's worth. So please, don't do that. All right, hopefully in this video, you learned what scientific notation is, why it is useful, how to properly write in scientific notation, how to calculate in scientific notation, both in your head and on a calculator. Thank you and good luck.